important work. In service of citizens, we can, through partnership like Twaweza, improve citizens' engagement and mobilization. I think we need to engage the citizens more and more. We need to mobilize them. We need, I think, what they are now calling mindset change. And if we don't do that, all the programs that we are planning to do will be in vain. Because even the parish development model, we are saying, look, under financial inclusion, we shall invest 100 million per year in the parish circle. But are people going to use this money effectively? Do they know why we are giving them that 100 million? Do they know that this money is just seed capital? Seed capital to start the circle. But a circle can only thrive if they save. It will not thrive because of that seed. And do they know that a seed must be planted in order to yield? You can give someone seed and he cooks it and eats it. But a seed under normal circumstances is supposed to be planted. All that needs a lot of engagement, a lot of mobilization. But you also need to engage with the people whose voices you know. And I think Twaweza now is providing that information and that platform, so that even before we go for mobilization, we already know what is in the mind of the citizen. I have been informed that the new panel has 3,000 respondents, which is national representative, and allows cluster analysis of the data for the youth and women, which are critical target groups for the government. At the same time, with this panel, regional analysis of the critical issues will be possible, and this can provide data on how different regions are performing in regard to poverty alleviation. This will help government to pay particular attention to addressing inequalities in our country, which have been made worse by COVID-19. Government needs mechanisms such as Sauti za Wananchi to monitor and keep track of what is happening in the communities, and to understand how well our policies and plans are being implemented and whether they are having the desired effects. Government has established structures right from the grassroots to the national level, but there remains a gap between central government and citizens despite many structures that exist. This gap in part explains the kind of perception citizens and government have about each other. With the decentralization, we thought this was going to end. We thought we were giving power to the people. But I don't know whether they are feeling this power. I don't know yet. Are they feeling this power? We have LOC1 chairman, we have LOC2, we have LOC3, we have LOC5. And we are saying now the district should plan for themselves. But I've been a local government leader. And planning starts at the parish. But one day I went for a parish conference. You know, budgeting starts early. Even now we have finished reading the budget, we are starting a new financial year, budgeting will begin immediately. But when I was at the parish conference, the parish chief came and read out what should be done. But I suspected It's not the people who gave him what he was reading. And I said, but parish chief, you have come to read these things. What are the people saying? And they say different things completely. So you just see that even when there is decentralization, people are not feeling the decentralization. They are not feeling this power. And I think probably they don't know even what their rights are. They don't know what their roles are as citizens. So that's why I call upon civil society. Let us go down there and educate their people about their civic rights, so that people can know that they have a role to play in management of affairs, in management of the affairs. But otherwise, we shall continue going there to read for them, and then after that, when the meeting ends, we assume that's what they wanted, even when that's what even when that was not the truth. So civil society, please, let us go down there, all of us, and educate these people so that they can demand for services that they really want, and not us deciding for them. So Sauti za Wananchi, when you are compiling all this data, don't just go to interview people. Also go to educate people that these are your rights, and therefore you should demand for the services you want. Therefore, Sauti za Wananchi will contribute towards generating data to help the government ascertain what citizens know about our programs, so that we can realign implementation and target our information and mobilization campaigns. In this way, we can use our campaigns to change attitudes among public officials and communities, and ensure that the programs are responsive to citizens' needs. During implementation of these programs, including the parish development model, we will also be able to understand citizens' experiences and concerns. Actually, tomorrow we are starting the mobilization geared towards parish development model, and we think we should go and listen to the people and see whether they understand it, and get feedback from them, and see whether we can do some bit of changes if we feel they are not understanding it very well, and if we feel we are doing what they don't want. So as ministers, they have flagged us off. They flagged us off yesterday. We need to go to the field and go and talk to the people about parish development model, even before we disperse the money. Otherwise, we might send the money there and create no impact. Utilization of citizen-generated data and evidence could be a game changer in terms of success of the parish development model and other programs, because of the platform's ability to provide timely, relevant, and accurate data. The ministry appreciates contributions of civil society organizations they make towards development of the country. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, Tawala provided data for key broader entry points like Chotera, Tororo, and Kampala, which was used in designing communication programs to increase uptake of prevention and protection guidelines. And now you're again providing us data as a ministry on the uptake of several of our products. I've seen social media percentages. This information is very good for my ministry. We are going to look at it and see how uptake of those services are and how we can improve them. I was talking to the executive director. He was showing me, he was saying, look, people on social media are only 12%. And for you are concentrating on social media. I said, yes, we know why. Because those are the influencers. For instance, my mother, even if you go to her now, she's 82, and tell her anything, as soon as you leave, she rings me. This man has been here. Is that true? Once I say no, even if it is, we take it like that. So while we are concentrating on that 12%, they are the influencers. They are the influencers. You have seen those talk shows on radios. Those talk shows. In the village, someone who is listening to a radio, he just says the radio says, say it. You say, but who said? He said the radio. Me, I heard it on Capital Radio, Sanyu, whatever. That's what the radio said. They don't care about who said, but the radio has said. And there are very few people who are on those talk shows all the time. Someone runs from one radio to another, one TV to another, and people are uptaking those news, and they just say the radio said. So 12% is very, very important. But the rest of the population is also what? Important. So we concentrate on them to ensure they give the right information, so because that information will trickle down to the people down there. But we are also looking for other ways of reaching the other 88%, because they are equally important and they should get good information. My ministry has also been partnering with Twaweza since 2019, particularly in the area of access to information. They shared data that showed that there was a low demand of information by the citizens and that public officers supplied inadequate information. But also since the Access to Information Act 2005, some public officers had not been oriented on this law. We partnered with African Freedom for Information Center and Twaweza to produce an access to information guide for public officers so that they clear on what the law requires of them. Orient, mentor civil servants so that there's increased proactive disclosure of information, but also citizens, media, NGOs, and the community leaders to know how to access information held by government. These trainings have taken place in Kamuli, Kole, Moyo, Namutumba so far. Access to information has been a problem. We in government have had problems because we don't relay information timely. And we know that. So people start speculating and they end up giving wrong information. But as the Minister of ICT and National Guidance, we are improving that. We are giving information timely, even hard information. So we are now not scared of giving information. And I've always asked journalists, please, if you get any problem in any ministry, there is any information you need, come to us. We are mediators between you, the Fourth Estate, and other ministries, departments, and agencies. We shall always get that information and pass it over to you, because we want correct and timely information so that the public doesn't keep speculating. This is a proof that as government, we are listening to the citizens and are committed to bringing the information gap in order to improve service delivery. The work of Sauti za Wananchi has added value to government's effort to encourage effective citizen participation to development planning, implementation, and monitoring, because information provided reflects the experiences of the citizens. As government, we appreciate, because we know that making decisions without data will not deliver the desired results, especially when we are talking about citizens' experiences, since we are committed to serving them. Arthur Cannon, a British physician and writer, once said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data." This statement echoes the centrality of data in fostering development and progress. Anybody who distances himself or themselves from data creates room for disinformation and speculation. Data is very, very important. My ministry is developing the parish development model management information system. And we are now collecting data on every household in the country, because this model is for only the 39% who are still in subsistence farming. So we are collecting data so that the 61% who are already in the money economy don't also encroach on this 100 million per parish. Because people have been thinking the 100 million is for everybody in the parish. No, it is for that 39% which is still in subsistence farming. So my ministry is developing a system, the management information system, so that when you go to join that circle, we must know whether you are still in subsistence farming for you to qualify. And that's what people have not got clearly. Because we are forming enterprise groups, and those enterprise groups, to be a member, you must be in that 39%. Data. And we are getting we are getting a lot of information, and we are finding so many things because in data per household in all villages. We reach a certain village, you know, our system is such that at least every village should have a primary school. But we reached a certain village in Buku, it has 27 churches and no primary school. 27 churches, poorest villages. So you can imagine what is in people's minds. I think they surrendered themselves to God and say, let us, for what churches? Everybody is thinking of, let us probably start a school, a primary school. So data is very, very important. Now in our system, because our ministry is working with WIBOS now, we're looking at village must also have a private school, must have a primary school. But without data, that one, if we wouldn't have known. So data is very, very important. As I conclude, I would like to reiterate that the government of the Republic of Uganda, and in this case led by President Yoweri Museveni and thereafter the NRM government, is a different mechanism analyzed and used to design intervention that transformation of our country and to the benefit of people. As government and my West Africa and the contribution towards getting for the public engagement. You all to accept data produced by Sauti and use it to guide your decisions. In this regard, we look forward to continued and mutually to continued and mutually beneficial partnerships with Twaweza in particular and civil society in general. Having said that, I now have the honor to launch the new Twaweza Sauti za Wananchi. And I thank you very much, and thank all of you who can. And you will excuse me, I have another function somewhere, but I would have listened to you. I always enjoy listening to civil society. And I would have listened to you and probably answered some questions, but I have another function somewhere to attend. But there is a member here, at least I've seen our MP for Kumi municipality, the honorable MP is here, and another, I've seen some MPs here. And you know, government has three arms: the executive, legislature, and judiciary. So even when I'm not here, you know that government is there. Sometimes, you know, MPs, when there is a problem, they say no, government, but they don't know that they are part of what? Of government. So all those problems are also theirs. So the MPs are here. I think they will answer most of the questions. But I thank you, Twaweza, for this data. We are going to use it very well. And I promise that we shall be in touch all the time. I thank you very much. I say all this for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Maybe before you go, we could just take a photo here, you know, for accountability purposes. You're the one who told me that yesterday. Thank you. So if you join us with Marie, the voice of the citizens, whom you're disputing, but she is. We take a photo and then we can release you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. As the minister walks out, I want to recognize the presence of Sikagaba, Advisor MS Virawa Silvia, Assistant Commissioner, Minister of ICT, Koluo Joseph, Honorable Koluo Joseph, MP, and Honorable Pio Sam, MP Kole. Thank you so much for honoring our invitations. At this moment, ask my colleague James Sierra, who is going to briefly share with us the methodology of how this Sauti za Wananchi data is got. Then afterwards, Raymond Mujuni will take up the other segment of of the program, which will be a Q&A. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm quite delighted to stand in front of you. And just before we start the Q&A session, I just want to take you through the methodology, because if we use crooked methodology, then the findings will be questionable. So before we proceed, I just want to take you back to Statistics 101, where we learned about sample and all that. And it might sound a little bit difficult to conceptualize, but I want to tell you something that has happened in many fields. Most of us are farmers or have some background in farming. When they test the soil sample, I don't think they normally go and dig all the soil in your shamba or in your garden and then go to a facility and then you are told we have this percentage of zinc and all that. It's also applicable in the medical field. When you kind of suspect that you have malaria, they don't go and drain all your blood to get to know whether you have malaria or not. So they just pick something and then they're able to get to know whether you have, whether you're sick or not. The same thing with statistics. We might ask ourselves, we have a sample, a population of 40 million, and then we're just using 3,000. How are the two related? And that's why we don't work independently. We have also to work with organization in terms of is the methodology or what we want to investigate, okay? So we have to work with the National Council of Science and Technology. UBOS has also to participate because they are the ones who manages the census, because what you're after is to get to see whether can you be able to capture what is in the population accurately. So I've just highlighted here. So we had to seek for the approval, which we did from the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology. So we have the research permit. And this was quite instrumental in terms of going to the third point, working with the local authority, because they keep on asking, have you gotten this and this? So we had to work hand in hand. Now, the sampling part, which is a bit technical, of which we won't get into details, we have to work with UBOS, that's Uganda National Bureau of Statistics. One, given that the custodian had said before, we had to be guided in terms of sampling, and they were fully involved in terms of selection and all that. I'll share that more. Besides that, we have something we call weights. So they participated in helping generate the weights, such that one person from Kampala, where it's quite populated, to get to know, will this person have the same weight with someone who comes from the north? So all those things were taken into consideration. Just want to give just a snapshot of the whole process. So we have a lot of discussion. I would like to start with the middle panel. So the first thing is to get to what's going on, and then from there we do the design of the tool to capture the data. Then from there we go out there to capture the information from the sample that we have already identified. We get the data and then we clean and then report. Now, when it comes to the methodology, based on the 2014 census data, we have around 78,692, of which it keeps on changing given that the population keeps on increasing. So it's not a very dynamic value which keeps moving towards increases day by day. So out of these, we selected three an enumeration area, and each enumeration area is just like one or two villages where clustered. There, we were able to list after we sampled them. We listed all the households, then out of it, we generated 10 households, as you can see here. Then from there, then we had also to get to the household that had been sampled, and then we had to seek consent first, and then sampled one adult aged above 18. And given that we'll be following these subjects or these people for a period of at least 2 years, it's between 2 and 3. So we had to provide them with a mobile phone, which there is also issue with coverage. So we had to switch from MTN, Airtel, and all that, such that we can easily be able to reach them. Now, getting now to the statistic part of it, we call this three-stage stratified sampling design. That's what was used technically. Whereby the stage one, that's when UBOS was heavily involved in terms of helping us be able to draw this. Allow me to get into the details. We have 15 regions which have to be well represented, of which they are clustered based on some demographic characteristics that are well known to UBOS. So we had to ensure that the representation of these regions is proportional to the population. So if a certain region has like let's say 1 million, another one has like 500,000. So one has to get half the share of the other one, such that we can have equal representation. Then a total of 300 EAs were sampled, and something that I'd forgotten is to mention about the urban-rural stratification has to be established such that when you just tabulate the weighted sample data, you'll be able to get if it's 67 versus 21, it has also to be reflected from the sample. Now, the second level was to sample the 10 households, which I've just described. So we list all the households. So we had to go physically to the list of the households participated. Went to the eastern side of Uganda. We list everything, and then we had a computerized process that helped us to sample the 10 households. Then the third stage, after seeking consent, because there's nothing that you'll be able to do without asking whether should you move on or not, then we had to sample an adult aged above 18, and then from there, we could be able now to get the information. So in a nutshell, this is what happened. The survey happened in the last quarter of 2011. So these are the households, the 3,000 individuals. As I've just described before, we use multi-stage stratified, so in proportion to population approach. Now, one of the challenge of which I think with time things are improving, unlike how things were in 2017 when network coverage was not as it is right now. So based on the few surveys, it's over 75% of Wananchi have mobile phones. And besides that, we have different networks, MTN and all that. So whenever you go to a place, if the one that has the strongest signal is like MTN, that's what we used to provide. If it's Airtel, we used to do that such that we reduce the region that is not covered by the available network. So the baseline was face-to-face. As I've told you, we had to go physically. Then we have subsequent, as found in April, we had to conduct a telephonic survey of the 3,000 respondents that we were able to sample. Now, in terms of sampling error, this is a little bit theoretical. It's plus or minus 2 with 95 confidence interval. But as it was mentioned before, we have sub-national analysis. So you expect to have a higher margin error. Instead of plus or minus 2, it went up a little bit to plus or minus 5. And before I end my presentation, you heard that we had another wave, 2017. So out of the feedbacks that we received in terms of improving and some of the questions that could not be answered by the previous sample, we did a few adjustments in terms of increasing the sample size. So it's no longer 2,000, now we have 3,000. Why? Be able to respond to that. In terms of replacement, we had like a baggage, because what we used to do, we used to sample 2,000, that's 10, and then 200 EAs, and that's 2,000. But we had in store like 2 households per EA, such that if one household happens to drop, we had to do the replacement. Now, one of the things that we did, how cost effective it was, because one, it's like putting something pending, and you have to keep on calling these people to make them relevant to the study and all that. So the cost of maintaining the 2 subjects per year was quite high. So we decided we'd rather increase the sample size, collect information from all these people, but ensure that we have enough sample size such that if there is dropout along the way as we proceed collecting the data, at least the sample size will be big enough to answer a few questions that will be asked. And one of the reasons I've said, but the number of household was maintained at 10. Sometimes we can vary between 10 and 20, but given the kind of survey that we're conducting, so we decided to settle to maintain the 10. So the critical part in terms of increasing, the reason why we had to increase from 2003 to 3,000 was because of sub-analysis, analysis at sub-national level, whereby you had to consider the issues, peculiar issues in the north. So you had to have sufficient enough sample size such that we can be able just to pick data from the north and be able to analyze it independently. The same thing with the eastern, western region, and central part was of interest. Kampala, which is part of it. So we have to ensure that we have data for the central part, but within central, we had also to oversample Kampala such that we can be able to know what's going on. And besides that, the additional factors also we considered, as one of them being gender, which has also already been mentioned. And it's easy now to extract data for youths and be able to get to know what's going on. So with all this, we try to summarize or to simplify the methodology. Probably at another level, we can get into details, but we believe whatever you have shared is enough to help you to understand or to have confidence on the findings that have been shared. That's all for today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, James. My job here today is really simple. It's to get you people to speak back to Twaweza, because Twaweza has been speaking since morning. So I ask that if you have questions about anything that's been presented today, now's the perfect time to ask those questions. We'll have a microphone moving round. I don't know where that second microphone is. And so if you have a question, please put up your hand. I see one right there, Cherukwet. Yes, I got it right. And yes, we'll start from Cherukwet and then we'll come around the room. I request that you move the microphone around, starting at the extreme end. And I'll ask the team from Twaweza to be taking down the questions, because then we'll answer them at once. It's not working? Okay.
Thank you so much, Raymond. I'm Cherukut Miriam from the Uganda National NGO Forum. I work under the Policy Governance and Civic Engagement component. I have one question about the data and also a general comment. The question relates to data on social media usage that Marie told us is 12%. I hope I got it right. And surprisingly, it relates with 12% tax on internet in Uganda. I'm just wondering whether you dug a bit deep to find out why. there is really limited social media usage, apart from the factors that we know. As an ordinary citizen, I would quickly point to things like the high data costs. I would point to things like closure of Facebook and many others. But it would be interesting to read more about what you found out, why there is still very limited social media usage. Secondly, is generally about the data that you've consistently shared with us, and the fact that there's very minimal change in the data. Either there's no change, it's static, or some of the indicators that you've been updating us on are worsening, or there's really limited change. And we know that when data is not used, it is useless. It's not useful to those who are expected to make decisions to improve the conditions of citizens or to improve the indicators. So really, my question for all of us to ponder is, how do we improve our, or step up our engagement, especially with policymakers at national level? Your video really shows that there is a lot of political will at district level to address citizens' issues. And yet, the local government receives peanuts of the budget. Recently, in the recent budget that was passed, I think all local governments got 5.1 trillion out of the 48 trillion. And your data has told us majority of the citizens are upcountry in the local government. So really, how do we step up our engagement? How do we get the national level policymakers to have the will to address citizens' concerns? Because every other day we are coming back to these conference centers to look at the same data. It is not improving. It is remaining static. How do we get them to improve allocation of resources so that the citizens have better livelihoods and the indicators of development increase? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Silas Augon, MP representing the people of Kumi Municipality. And I want to recognize the presence of Miriam here. She worked with me. She was in actual aid in Kumi. Thank you for the insights. I know people who have been in civil society for long really know the path, and they can trace for us and they tell us, let's pass it here. And I'm happy with what you've noted. Is there a change? Because you see, Tuawesa is doing a lot of work. I may not make so many questions, but if I made my comment, I hope it can be understood. One, in terms of quality, any of our work as Tuawesa should be on issues of quality. First of all, in terms of the data, because we can collect data, but as long as it's not on a quality side, then we're wasting our time. Why? Because you will inform Parliament in a wrong way, and we end up making wrong decisions. So quality to me is critical, and I'm happy that the methodology was given out here. But I want to ask a question, whether there has been an attempt by Tuawesa to link up with the Parliament so that some of the questions that we want to be asked to the people also come from the representatives of the people. I think it's very, very important. Like, you posed a question about the budget for local governments. If 5.1 trillion out of 48 is the only piece going to local governments, can we go down and make a survey? How does the balance that remains at the center make a big impact as compared to the other one? So that as we go to that house, we know and we are well informed. Maybe somebody will tell you that when we leave money at the center, it works better for the country. And they should prove to us based on what? Data. So is there any evidence? So the quality of the data is a must. That is what will help the country to come out of the pit. Then the utilization. Today, we are launching the second one. How far did we go with the first one? In terms of consumption, yes, you released the results. What did the parliament, what did the government, what did the executive do about that report? Was it embedded in the process of budgeting? Our representative role, the appropriation, the legislation, and then you talk about oversight. What impact did the first report have on those four? I think if we link that, then the people will start to benefit. I think when you look at the Constitution, for me, I always move with my Constitution because it's my Bible. Chapter 4 of the Constitution, it much talks about the human rights. And there's a big linkage between the surveys that you conduct and the human rights observers in the country. I say so because, for instance, we talk about equal opportunities. If we are appropriating with some kind of blindness, money can easily go to other people consistently. You give to one point again, and again. And yet there's a community that has never seen a school, like the minister said. So that is why I think really we need to get well focused so that we see when we use the data that you bring, quality is seen in the work of parliament, and the impact will be felt at the bottom. I want to thank you. Of course, the last one is about the issue of productivity. You all know that right now, Uganda is burdened with a debt of well over 73 trillion, if I'm correct. That is a huge burden. It is a huge burden. Sometimes it is because we are not conducting proper surveys, or the surveys which are there are not of quality, and we do not utilize the results of the surveys. If you go around Uganda today, there are so many people who are going down to conduct surveys. They collect data, they bring it, they keep it. It is not utilized. It doesn't help. So for me, my question as I sit down, how far have you gone in terms of making sure that the government indeed utilizes the effort by civil society, particularly this team? So the citizens' voice matters. Without their voice, we are working for ourselves and not for the citizens. So I thank you for choosing to invite me to participate in this event. And you may excuse me and allow me to run. I am running the National Legal Aid Bill, and I left the team at the Fairway Hotel. That's because I know the importance of this meeting. So I had to make sure I come here. So you'll excuse me and allow me to go for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Toeza, for the key interesting findings. I am Gerald Pade Auku, and I work with Transparency International Uganda. My comment goes to the very last presentation in the report, which speaks to citizens now interested in sitting in the panel. This has been overdue. This is, of course, backed by the findings, 85% at the household level, and then 69% at the community level, followed by 60% at national level. Currently, we are speaking about the parish model. It has become a hit song within government. But my question my concern is about to what extent has, for example, government engaged the citizens. Of course, the minister was here trying to speak about it, how they are now preparing to begin engaging the citizens, but isn't it late?
I think it is late. Already the manner has been passed and ready for, the appetite for implementation is already, raising up. So the issue of participation, engaging the citizens in decision making is critical. And I want to call upon the media to help us to increase the voice, the volume. Is it the voice, the volume? Younger sound, the voice. So the media help us to really drum this so that the government up the game. The other question, it's on language. You clearly highlighted the languages that are spoken in Uganda across the regions, and both rural and urban. But now wondering, where is Kiswahili? We are speaking about the East African community, and Kiswahili is one of the languages that is being promoted. I am wondering whether you deliberately, engaged around that. We want to see Ugandans speak Kiswahili. From experience, I know the eastern part and a bit of the north speaks some bit of Kiswahili. So we want to see whether we are progressing to that level so that we are able to have a language that unites us as East Africans. I beg to submit.
Thank you very much, Team Aweza. Marie, thank you very much for that presentation. For the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda. Among the reflections or the questions you raised for reflection was to do with how do we keep the citizens at the center and reverse the growing sense of resignation. I think we'll need to be a little bit harder when you're emphasizing on citizen participation. Because my understanding, and because I come from a human rights perspective, is that we are treating participation as a luxury from government or from the state. Yet our constitution is very clear under Article 38 that every citizen has the right to participate in the governance affairs of his or her country through either our elected representatives who are seated here or through civic organizations. If we could emphasize that point of participation, then we'd be able to amplify the citizens' voices. So my appeal really is to see, because I hope even the Human Rights Commission is here, because that's their mandate in terms of civic education is concerned. If we do not empower citizens to know that it is their right to question certain decisions, then you'll always be waiting for the likes of General Salim Saleh to come and call you. So what if he doesn't come? So what if Twaweza doesn't go to carry out this service? What happens? The citizens will go to sleep. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Twaweza. I was hesitant to speak because in a sense I'm part of the Twaweza family, but I said let me speak to my family on 4 little things. I greatly appreciate the data shared by I know Israel is producing meat, beef, by growing it in a lab. But I think for Uganda, for East Africa, we are growing the food on soil. How about this question of land ownership and use? The majority of the land users in Uganda do not own the land. The majority of the owners of big chunks do not use the land for food production. They use it for speculation. And that includes you and me, who are owning huge chunks. So perhaps we need another study, which is going to seek citizens' voices on that question of land ownership and use. Second question is on the issue raised by Eric Reinert. Eric Reinert is a student of industrial policy, and he argues that the problem of famine is a problem of farmers, not industrialists. So we are seeing 61% of our people occupied in farming, but they are food insecure. And that is reminding us that our conversation must not be timid about the need to transform our society from a backward agrarian society into an industrial society. In other words, we need to factor into this question the issue of industrial manufacturing. Number three, unfortunately, the voice of the citizen has limitations. And I'm saying this with tongue in mouth because my boss from Twaweza is here. I'm saying it with tongue in mouth because if we get too much romanticization with the Sauti za Wananchi, the voices of the citizen, we miss out what they're unwilling to tell us. Albert Einstein reminds us, what you see depends on where you stand. What do we need? Spend the bulk of the budget on agriculture. But we have already seen that agriculture does not create the jobs we need, the opportunities we need. So where is the space for hybridizing, in the Sauti za Wananchi study, hybridizing the need for transformative leadership as we promote Sauti za Wananchi? Because there are things the citizens will not appreciate. They will say, we are the peasants, we are the people, we are the majority. But how do we promote that transformative leadership? And very finally, I want to remind my friends, my listeners, that Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados made a very, very moving speech. If you haven't listened to it, it's on YouTube. Please listen to it. The question she raises, this is the Prime Minister of Barbados at the Climate Change Conference, most recent. She said, when will leaders lead? So as we discuss Sauti za Wananchi, the voices of the citizens, when will you and I, the leaders, lead? Thank you very much. I submit.
Thank you. My name is Sisi Kagaba. I'm just going to make it brief. I think one, to thank Twaweza for the wonderful report. I think mine are just broad when we talk of citizens' voices. And the minister talked about the whole issue of the parish development model. So what comes to my mind is if we're talking of citizens' voices, were the citizens involved in the whole issue of the parish development model? And what we need to ask ourselves is, different is a parish development model going to be than, I mean, we've seen Operation Wealth Creation, we've seen Youth Livelihood Program. So how different is this parish development model going to be? Because if it's going to be different, then I'm sure it's going to mitigate some of the challenges that are being brought out in the briefer of Twaweza. Then the other one that comes to mind is, I know the minister in charge of ICT talked about the whole issue of access to information. Now, I'm very passionate when it comes to issues of access to information, and I'm glad that the minister talked about trying to bridge the gap. But again, we also know that much as we have access to information, the Access Information Act, we also have the Official Secrets Act. You have a law that gives and you have another law that takes away. So how is that able to be reconciled? And then lastly, I think from what one of the MPs said, to provoke debate, of course, was the whole issue of the debt burden. But again, we need to ask ourselves, when you're talking about the debt burden, who actually approves these debts? Is it the civil society organizations or is it Parliament? So when we are trying to talk about civil society and how they can handle issues of debt, the issue that comes to mind is who approves these debts? Are these debts approved without the consent of Parliament? And what, I mean, when you look at the budget that was read, that has been passed recently, you're going to find that a big chunk of money is going towards debt. And obviously that has a spillover effect on how the cost and standard of living for Ugandans is going to be impacted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Opio Samuel, and I represent the people of Kole North in Lango sub-region. I want to thank Twaweza for the report that they have presented. And I just want to state that what we really need, yes, we want to hear the citizens' voices. But in those citizens' voices, we want to see the citizens' data, which can enable us take out the actions that can be able to be translated, especially for us as members of Parliament at that upper level. We need to be able to take decisions at the top which can make an impact at the bottom level. I just want to talk a bit on some of the insights given. We've heard about the issue of the food insecurity. I would personally would have wanted to see the deeper details. Because I'll give an example. I have a lot of community dialogues with my people. And one of the biggest causes of food insecurity is actually the cash crop farming. Because what has happened is that they're focusing so much on growing the cash crops that they forget about the food crops. We know in the olden days, there used to be granaries, which were warehouses where they would store the food. I can tell you, go across the whole country, you will not see any granary where they have stored the food itself. But they are planting the cash crops, which are seasonal, and they will spend the money, run out of the money, and at the end of the day, they don't have the food itself. So it's one of the key reasons that we are seeing driving some of the insecurity. But even look at this data, compare it with, I'll give an example, America. The amount of land in the US placed for maize farming is the same amount of land placed in Africa for maize farming. But America is generating 6 times more yield than the Africa. Same size of land, but 6 times more yield than what we're getting. So we need to start questioning ourselves, what is driving this food insecurity? Is it just drought? Is it just poor land use practices? We need to go into the deeper details of that. Going into agriculture, just 2 weeks ago, I interacted with my communities, and I was asking them just one simple question. How much do you actually get in a year from your farming itself? They grow a lot of soya. I was very shocked. In about 4 places where you met about almost 20 villages, they were saying that in a year what they will earn is just 500,000 shillings. 500,000. That means they're getting about just 40,000 shillings a month. That is the income of the farmer. When you go to the UBOS data, it's not very different, because UBOS says in Lango sub-region, for example, the median monthly income is just 70,000. That means a farmer in the Lango sub-region will not get more than 1 million shillings in a year. When you go to the average for the country, it is about 191,000. The median income. Median income means if you get the whole population, rank from the lowest to the highest, the middle population, the amount of money they earn is 191,000 per month. That means half of the population is earning below 191,000 per month. That's about just 2.4 million. Now, when you want to understand what is the impact of that, go and analyze the cost of fees. I decided to go into the cheapest rural school in secondary, and I found that the fees per term, which is a government-aided school, is 250,000 shillings. But on top of that, you must come with 60 kilos of maize and 40 kilos of beans. When you add it up, that's about 400,000 per term. In a year, that is 1.2 million. But the farmer earns how much? 500,000 shillings. I tried to ask them on average, how many children do you have? Some of them said 3, 4. There's one who said, the ones I can remember are about 10 children. So you can see, you try to do the mathematics, it just can't work out. Now, parish development model has come in as an intervention, which is good, to say we want to move you, each household, to earn about 20 million shillings a year. But where are we now? 500,000 shillings a year. I did an oversight on Emioga on my constituency. These livelihood programs are great, but the problem with them, I always say, for example, Emioga, it's like a very nicely designed lorry, but you decide to put the engine of a motorcycle and the tires of a bicycle, and they expect it to move and reach the destination. It will not. They came and poured 560 million shillings into the population. What happened? They embezzled it. In one case, somebody who had never earned 50,000 shillings in his life, had 100,000 shillings in his life, was given the powers to go and withdraw 40 million shillings from a bank account. And he went and withdrew it. What do you think happened? He just ran mad. He just ran mad. People married more women. That money was just wasted. It was washed off. So as much as we're saying, right now, the problem has been that they cannot access capital. Now, when the capital has come, it has again become a problem, you see. So we need to go deeper so that you understand where the problem is. When you go to the public services, I just looked at the UBOS data on education. It is very shocking. If you go to, right now, secondary school enrollment is at 27%. That means the percentage of children between 13 years to 18 years who are supposed to be in secondary school only 27%. That means you have about 73% that are not in secondary school. They are not studying. You know, I realized how serious this issue is when I went to my constituency and I was meeting the PLE candidates. There were about just 20 in P7. When I asked how many are in P1, there were 350. So what happens? From 350, it is dropping to 20. And UBOS data supports all this. So there's a very, very big issue when you look at, and these are the expectations they are talking about. Health services, they are talking about education, they're talking about water. You know, we see a lot of very beautiful figures at the top. But when you go on the ground, the figures are very ugly. You know, it shows there's a very, very big gap. You know, so we want to have citizens' voices that are aligned with the politician's voice. It's aligned with the civil society's voice. It's aligned with the government's voice. Alignment of all these voices. But at the same time, they not just become voices. We want to see citizen action coming in place. We want to see a parish development model that will actually come and transform, you know, not one that comes in with a new name, but without new changes in it. So I want to thank for this data that has been done, but I really want to emphasize that we need to ensure we get actionable data. I have done a lot of data compilation in my constituency. I had the minister talking about churches, and I laughed because my constituency has unbelievably 252 churches. 252. But it has 30 primary schools, 6 secondary schools, and 6 health centers. And I told them that if we could just agree and convert this, not all of them, but just half of these churches into secondary schools, half of these churches into health facilities, wards, maternity wards, I think the citizens' voice would have solved all the problem. They actually have some of the solutions with them, you know. And I realized that as much as, and it has been difficult, if you look at all these 250 churches, they are constructed by the citizens themselves. And these are investments in hundreds of millions, they're in billions, you know. So there is a big challenge at the very bottom there. And what I will always say is that as we talk about the citizen's voice, I will categorize into 3. There are interventions which will need central government. There are interventions which will need the local government. But the interventions that needs the citizens themselves. If we do not have that intervention, the mindset change, to relook at things, we will be able to continuously pick their voices, but will fail to pick the solutions, which is most importantly needed to them. So I think I just say that let's get more actionable data. Let's put figures to them. Let's unpack them so that when I go back, I know that in my constituency in Kole North, in my constituency in Central Kampala, in my constituency, in my district, these are the 5, 6, 7 things that I'll be able to do. Thank you.
All right. We still have one more question, and then we will wrap up the question time.
Thank you. My name is Wambi Michael. I work with Uganda Radio Network. The first issue I want, okay. One of the issues, when I look at your data, you're talking about asset ownership. And I see issues like television ownership, radio ownership. To me, I think you should have expanded it to look at more other assets that can actually produce value. If I buy a television set at 300,000, I'll own it, yes, but it will not produce anything apart from the information. I know information is power, but I've been to areas where somebody is aspiring to have a goat. He has chicken, but he's aspiring to have a goat, and from a goat, he's aspiring to have a cow. And that person will be well off than somebody who has maybe a radio set. So why didn't you look at other assets like land, livestock, and what have you? Because those, in some of our communities actually, where I come from, if you don't have a cow, you don't have goats, you are a poor man. You may be living in a grass-thatched house, but if you have cows, then you are better off. The other interesting aspect in your data is actually about disability. How inclusive have we looked at disability issues in this country? I think the disabled have always been left out, even when we have mountains and mountains of data. The other day, I was in Gulu Regional Referral Hospital. There's an orthopedic ward. This ward was last supplied with the materials for making those artificial limbs. 10 years ago, they've never received anything like that. Then I found around 6 people. They had come from all the way from Amolata to Gulu Regional Referral Hospital. On that day, the orthopedic staff were striking. And then I saw this old lady with the totally worn out artificial limb. She wanted a new one, but your government had not supplied it with material. For the last 10 years, they've never received supplies. So I think this government, it's not that they don't have data. They have data, but I think the willingness to use that data to turn around things is lacking. So how do we turn the data we have into action? I once, as a journalist, used to report at Parliament. And there are times you would see NGOs bring sacks of papers, reports, and what have you. Then, as MPs move out of the chambers, there's a big green can out there. And then you just see them dump. You see them dump the data there. So your MPs are not reading. So even if you took this data, maybe now that they have it on the tabs, possibly. And Bob, I'm sorry, you have some sort of faith in Uganda Human Rights Commission. Yes, it can do good work, but they've produced reports right from Sekaja, from the Leti, Medi, and now, but those reports have never been discussed. We have a Human Rights Committee. So your chapter 4 is there, but it is not, it's on paper. Thank you.
All right, I'll take 2 more questions. The lady and then Pius, and then we'll wrap it up and bring the people from Traweza to respond to the citizens' voices they've had.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. It had been called by 2 things. One is what Dr. talked about, and I'm happy that much as we anticipated that the Twaweza launch was largely going to be on the citizens' voices, they came up with something that is now taking a larger part of the discussion, and that is the food insecurity. And I want to add my voice to what Honorable Sam has said, but also what the doctor has said. And it's also timely because, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war, we are underestimating it. But 1, 2, 3 years from now, we are going to go into an economic depression. And it's largely going to affect the production cycle itself, agriculture, and how are we responding to it? So I also want to add my voice and say, if we could do, Marie and the team, I know you're great at doing this, if we could go deeper into the food insecurity. I am very impressed with what Honorable Sam has said. I can relate to what he has talked about. Kole is not far from Noya, so we have a farm as a family. So we've ventured into agriculture, soya production, it's exactly what he talks about. And we've also learned out of it as a family that we need a mindset change of the people. They have the land, he says it's unutilized. It's not utilized, that is true. But apart from that, we are getting so many foreign investors in northern Uganda taking large chunks of this land. And what are they doing? They are now doing the work that would ordinarily be doing as citizens. And they will rip from our own land. Yes, it may be a lease, but leases go up to 100 years. So in those 100 years, what is our lifespan, our life cycle in Uganda? In those 100 years, they have taken over the whole northern Uganda. So, Honorable Sam, this is my plea. We wish that you could take our feedback, and we wish that more of the MPs could do what you do. Your interactions with the people is what is going to change their mindset. How many MPs go back to the ground and talk to their people and try to change how they feel, how they do, and for them to be able to know that they actually a solution to the problems that they have. And lastly, he's talked about persons with disability. And I agree with him as well that I think we are not intentional we, I mean we, all of us, government is all of us. I think we're not intentional when it comes to how can we help persons with disability. Because when we're talking about citizens' voices, we're not leaving them behind. We are the same. But do they have access to information just like the rest of us? Do they have access to this data? Are they taking equal participation in affairs, in governance? How they participate and how we participate is quite different. So I wish we could also probably do more research on this specific area. I wish the minister was still here. One of the things that I wanted to mention to him is what a section of persons with disabilities have ventured into. Key challenge that we have had in Uganda is persons with disability don't have access to information the way the rest of us have. We now have what we call Science TV Uganda. I don't know how many of us have watched their news. How can, and Miss Livia is not here right now, but this is something that we are going to pick up with the Ministry of ICT. There's Science TV Uganda. I remember they reached out to us sometime. They need more information to relay on their channels. How can the Ministry of ICT support such an initiative of 3 youth who are persons with disabilities coming up with a second TV station for persons with disability in East Africa? That is something commendable. I wish the ministry could take that up.
All right, thank you. I'll allow Pius, and then we'll close the questions and invite the Twaweza team to respond to them.
Thank you, Raymond. There's a statement here in the brief which says there's a strong link between languages spoken at home and household wealth. Wealthier households are more likely than others to speak either Luganda or English. Kindly, can you put some flesh on this? I would like to understand why is it so. And then the other question was in terms of responses to in your survey. Did you find it kind of a point in that if Uganda had a national language, let's say like Tanzania or Kenya, would the results probably have been different? Have you tried to compare? I'm sure you have done similar researches in Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda, and where those two have a national language. So are results and responsiveness different in countries where people have a national language vis-a-vis a country like Uganda where we don't have a national language? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those questions. I guess that I'm going to ask the team from Twaweza to come and respond. I guess for the technical questions about the data, that will be Marie. For the leadership and directional questions, we'll give those to Violet. And then for the strategic and the visionary questions, Aiden, I guess, to better place to answer those ones. Thank you. All right, should we start?
I'll start with the questions that are coming from Miriam. I
Yes.
think the best way to go around them is really to go by the people that have asked the questions.
Okay.
So Miriam asks us 2 questions.
This points us to, will be explained by some of the data points. For example, the functional literacy of our population speaks to that. The accessibility of internet itself speaks to that. And also you can speak about the poverty level, all relate to that. Maybe in future we will go deeper and ask that. But in a way, the data itself explains why you have that low usage. But I think the reason we raise it is there is a whole hype for us to say, let's engage online. But the question is, how are we engaging the larger population? Where you have more than 69% of the people in the room, where you have the other 80-something, 88% not using these facilities, then how do you build that agency? And again, still on this same question, remember we have telephone penetration, which is really high. I think it's almost like 68%. I don't have my brief here. Now, how do we leverage those many Ugandans that have phones, even when they are not accessing social media? Is there a different way we could reach out to them and galvanize them? I think for me that is how we should be thinking about it. The second question that you're asking is, we see minimum change. How do we improve resource allocation? Luckily for us, we have a member of parliament before us. Because one of the reasons why we collect this data is to point, of course the member of parliament was asking, is this voice, is this data? We are trying to ask the question. And when we are talking about the voices, we are talking about people's experiences. These are their lived reality. To have members of parliament, we are privileged to have technical people and all of us stakeholders. The question should be, how do we use these people's lived realities to address the challenges that people are grappling with? And we should be asking ourselves, why have our programs not addressed or not caused the turnaround? And why are the budgets not responding? The reasons why we actually invited members of parliament, we're trying to get to a place where this data, experience and live with. But of course, I think the conversation is for all of us to see how we turn around this. The member of parliament, Okumi, spoke about quality. Clear is not questionable in terms of quality, and I wouldn't get to that. He also spoke about, he asked about the consumption of this data. How much of this data was consumed, and how has this shaped appropriation and ourselves, what we need to actually do to make sure that people are producing that must produce. And then how do you move this bigger population, the 68%, to be engaged into maybe the industrial sector as opposed to production? And maybe how do you deal with the question of land and agro inputs? And there are so many questions around that. But there are those questions that we can't ask through our own methodology. But there are those, the data we bring is basically to ask the technical people to dig deep. If this is the real experience, we have invested in operation wealth creation. We have invested in now parish development model. What is it that we are changing to get a different kind of results? I think that should be, how do we move away from where we have been and not the rhetoric. There is a question, I think Robert Chirenga basically is inviting us and challenging us to be more intentional, to be more firm when we are speaking about citizen participation. But maybe to share something very small. I think for people that belong to the civil society platform, we have to learn to speak the language that citizens understand and that they can relate to.
it's okay and it's fine for you to go and tell them that you have your rights. But you know what they'll be saying? How much is Robert paid to come and speak about rights? That's the question they'll be asking themselves. How much is Marie earning? How much is Miriam being paid? And who is paying Miriam for you to come and tell me about the rights? So for me, I think the question becomes, how do we actualize participation? What does participation mean to somebody in Hoima? What does participation mean to somebody in Rukunjiri, and how does it look like? And if we can remodel and reorganize that and communicate it the way people understand it, the chances are we will have them on board. Citizens sitting in the panel, to what extent is government engaged with the citizens? I think that came from Gerald and has already left. Of course, I think, you know, earlier on when we were speaking, I was saying that there is when leaders move over the ladders, and we have data which shows, you see that gradual shift. Initially, people are relating so well with the LC1s, and they easily access them and get information, and they do have interaction. When they get to the LC3s, the interaction starts to drop. By the time you are at LC5, there is hardly that connection. They are only meeting at funerals, and by the time you get to Honorable Opio, if he doesn't make the effort, then that doesn't happen. So a platform like Sauti, what it does is to go and get these experiences, get their opinions, collate them and package them and funnel them upwards, so that these people continue having that interface of what these lived realities are. And then there are other questions that I think should have been responded to by somebody from government, but before that I can ask my colleagues to make comments as well.
Thank you, Violet. I missed some of the questions that stepped out a bit, but I'll just respond to some that I was able to take note of. To the question and the recommendations made by Honorable Opio on having data that is actionable, and there was a lot of discussion or submissions on food security and also the disability issue. On the livelihoods, I would just like to direct you to our website, to Aweza. We have a brief that we released together with the Food Rights Alliance. It has more detail on the food security issues. That is, what kind of agriculture are the Ugandans involved in, what are the challenges that they're experiencing in that production process. And beyond that, we went ahead to have a different session with different stakeholders and came up with a number of recommendations for different actors to act on. Martin over there is from Food Rights Alliance. I cannot recall the name of the brief exactly, but it's there. So for more detail on the food security, you can go into that. I believe that is fair enough. I don't have the details offhand, but we have a brief that can answer some of those, most of those questions. Then to the question from Wambi, why not look at the other assets? Yes, you're right. We just picked a few items, but we have a whole list of items that we look at when we are trying to understand the household's socioeconomic status using the living standards measure. So we picked the items from that measure and then plotted a few here. But we can go into more if at all there is need for that. Then, then to the question from Pius, you asked about the language, that why is it that we find that in the households that are richer are speaking Luganda, a bit of English, and a bit of the Runyankore Ruchiga.
I think since most of us are Ugandans, we know where most of the business is happening. It's within these regions. It's something that is probably historical from the colonial days, because the colonialists started here. Where were the churches? Largely, it all started here, and then it has been spreading over time. So it's something that is historical, and that's why you see that in our data we see a bit of exclusion, or should I say a bit of resignation in the eastern and northern parts, because those are the poorer regions of Uganda. So the language that is spoken within the central and the west and the greater Kampala is of course automatically linked to the businesses, how you transact business in Uganda. For those that are not Ugandan, in Uganda it's quite easy to conduct any business, even when you are using Luganda, even if you're not in the central region. If you go to Gulu, if you speak Luganda, you will somehow survive. So it's the business languages. That is the reason. Then, okay, I think that is all I'll respond to. Oh, the Swahili. Yes, there was a question about Swahili, that did we just ignore the Swahili? 0.4% are the ones that are speaking Swahili. Yes, it's taught in the schools, but for most of our adults who are 18 years and above, they have not yet grasped that to speak comfortably in it, because when we're asking these questions, we try and ease them into the process. Speak a language that you're most comfortable with, where we can be able to create that rapport and have a smooth discussion. And Swahili did not really pop up that highly. Thank you.
There is one of the questions that was asked about, it was more of a comment about the enrollment in secondary schools, where you have only 27% and you have the 73. And for me, this basically speaks to the functional literacy we are speaking about. But also, it also speaks to when we are saying we are mobilizing people, when we are saying we are designing programs, we have to keep this at the back of the mind. For a long time, how do we call it? The completion rate. I see Robert Mugambo in the room. At some time, it stood at, I think, 30, was it 33? Completion of the education cycle up to primary. So meaning that the dropout rate has persistently been that low. And for me, I think the invitation for all of us, because we have had universal primary education since 1997, and again, we have had universal secondary education for a long time. But over those years, every year, every cycle that completes, we drop 70% of those people. And that directly plays in the adult population and those numbers that you see. So the question then becomes, how do we start reversing that? And what needs to be done? Already we know what is happening in terms of the ongoing strikes for the teachers, teaching science versus teaching the other language subjects. And I think we should all be interested, because when we look at the end side of the data and say, okay, the functional literacy is bad, the internet usage is bad, how we use even the smartphones, you would be surprised. They are all speaking to that. But also it also speaks to how much information or how much can citizens actually utilize, and how can they engage with these processes if the functional literacy remains that low, and how do we reverse that?
Okay, thank you, Violet. So before I hand over the mic to Aiden, there was one last comment. I remembered a question from Pius, that how does it look like in Kenya and Tanzania in comparison to Uganda? What we see is that in terms of their internet usage, they are higher than us. I think Kenya is at about 27%. Then TZ is at about 40-something, not so? Yes. Yeah, about 50% are using internet. And in Uganda, we've seen that proportion is much lower. So it could be, it's something that to think about. It could be that maybe having platforms that are in Swahili and everybody can easily understand that makes it easier. While in Uganda, if at all you're not comfortable with English, you will shy away from platforms like Twitter, which are largely concentrated in English. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Mujuni, you told me to talk about strategic issues. My goodness. I hope I can make sense. But maybe I can touch on two that encapsulate what I've heard. One was about food security, land, agriculture, etc. And the honorable MP's real concern that we don't have granaries anymore, people are converted to cash crops, etc. You see, cash is a very valuable commodity to have. You know, it has three major elements to it. One, it's a store of value, and it doesn't rot, you see. That's the issue. You get cash, it doesn't get eaten by weevils and other things. Even if you store your grain in a granary, if it's not well kept, that value will diminish. Medium of exchange. It's easier to exchange cash for airtime than a bag of whatever, cashew nuts, groundnuts, and other things. And also a unit of account. So even people in rural Uganda, Tanzania, etc., realize that there is perhaps greater convenience in doing cash crops, getting cash, than in storing food. Also because our governments have insisted so hard on getting people to plant cash crops for their own reasons, which is it's taxable, it's exportable for foreign exchange, all of these kinds of things. So people have been persuaded that this is the right way to go. And it is a mark of progress. Me, I've got my coffee, I've got my whatever. Even in the village, it is a mark of having made, made some steps going forward. It's not just Ugandan issue, this food insecurity issue. Even in Tanzania, the most fertile parts of the country are the places with the greatest malnutrition. You know, to you, Professor. It's where the greatest stunting is the greatest malnutrition, where we grow the most maize in Tanzania. Iringa, Sumbawanga, Mbeya, etc. It's the same kind of thing. So maybe just growing your own food, maybe it's not such a good deal. It's not such a good idea, honestly. Because you will grow maize, you'll grow matoke, and that's all you'll eat. Where you're going to get your proteins, your vegetables, your minerals, etc. If you don't grow them, you have to buy them. You need the cash. So you need somewhere to get cash in order to buy these other things which make your food much more nutritious for development. The other thing I want to sort of share a little bit here is on the issue of citizen voices, participation, the role of those of us in here, the 12% with on social media, and the influence. So my good friend Duncan Okello, I had a chance of working with him. He went on to become Willy Mutunga's right-hand man, chief of staff. Willy Mutunga, you know Willy Mutunga, Chief Justice in Kenya. Duncan and I used to argue a lot about development. And there's one thing he said, which I don't know whether he borrowed it from somewhere, I'm just going to attribute it to Duncan. It's a bit uncomfortable because it imbues us with a lot of responsibility. He said this: progress is always and everywhere an elite project. Development, progress is always and everywhere an elite project. And then he rolled out for me the philosophical and political philosophy evidence. Aristotle and his philosopher king idea, okay? Or the Marxist-Leninists and their vanguard of the revolution idea. Lenin wasn't interested in the hoi polloi of the citizens. He said the revolution, for it to survive, it needs to be led by a vanguard. In other words, people like him and Stalin and Trotsky. You know, damn, he didn't trust the lumpen proletariat. He called them the lumpen proletariat, right? Look at the Chinese Communist Party and the standing committee of the Politburo. It's 9 men. They're all men. And they're about to give, or they have given Xi Jinping life presidency. An elite project. Look at the American founding fathers, all slave-owning, propertied men. And yet they wrote the Declaration of Independence. They argued over this constitution, etc. Progress is always and everywhere an elite project. I think the evidence seems to suggest that. But the elite lead, but they don't necessarily are the ones to execute or even get the benefits of it. You go to the American Civil War, they fought about slavery. You know, it was a war between elites, by the way, the landowning elite of the South and the industrial elite of the North, to get rid of the unfair advantage that the South had for having free labor. Always and everywhere an elite project. Now, in our context, what does that mean for us? Those 12% are an elite. And you heard the minister, he's got his eye on those 12% because they are influential. What is our influence? How do we influence the mindset? How do we change? How do we shape our fellow Ugandans to really demand and act in their own self-interest, their own best self-interest? I know, Bwana Kirenga, it's a tough question, but it is actually ultimately partly our responsibility as well. I'll end with this. I was provoking my colleagues just last week. We were talking about digital tech and democracy. And I'm reading a book in which really boiled democracy down to me in a very nice way. He said, you know, democracy is a technology of social organization which tries to thread a path between the violence of chaos and anarchy, you know, like you get in Central African Republic, and the violence of tyranny on the other side. So democracy tries to expand that space for citizens to be safe from anarchy, but also to be free from tyranny. And it is always a negotiation that we are having. So the more we want freedom, the more we're going to have to demand for it. But some people will tell you freedom will lead to chaos and anarchy. I'm here to protect you from chaos and anarchy. But we have to be mature enough. We as the elite, we as the people who have access to information and access to this technology have to be able to nuance that argument. Say, actually, no. They're telling you violence and chaos and anarchy. Actually, they're talking about their own personal self-interest. So we have to be able to make a compelling case for citizens to be involved in the process of democracy that weaves a path between, again, the violence of anarchy and that violence of tyranny. Sauti za Wananchi tries to play that role. This data that we collect tries to play that role in asking the citizens, what is it that is your priority? How are you experiencing the delivery from government of the services to which you are entitled? And what is it that you are going to tell them, share with them, for them to act on? Right? And that gives us a sense of agency and a sense of responsibility for what it is that happens to us. And Sauti plays, we think, an important role in that interesting negotiation and debate between these two violences that we want to avoid. Thank you.
Aidan, before I let you go, there's one question that really threaded through so many people that I think that you've tactfully left out. How helpful has the data been from the first panel to the second panel? How helpful do you think that data has been both to government and to yourselves as an institution?
I think I'll let my colleagues here answer those questions on the nitty-gritty and the special thing. But I'll tell you one thing, strategically, I think how helpful Sauti has been to the idea that citizens have something to say to government. When we started here in Twaweza in 2017, the Sauti in 2017, we were very nervous, we were very worried that we might get into all sorts of trouble. So we focused actually on that, on instrumentalizing Sauti in a way that will help directly improve service delivery, public service delivery. And our board member, from Uganda at that time advised us in that way. And we're very glad we took that advice. Because we think, for example, and I'll let Marie and others tell you about, on the issue of access to water and the office of the Prime Minister or the Ministry of Water. They're changing how they're defining that very notion of access to water to be more in tune with how citizens feel themselves accessing water. You had the example about the SOPs around COVID and mask wearing. You had the issues about the hotspots for COVID-19. I think it really came into its own most directly in our contribution to how government communicated the SOPs COVID to the population. But I'll let my colleagues here then give you a bit more detail.
Thank you, Aiden. Raymond, we didn't tactfully dodge that. We had the assumption that when I stepped out, they were playing some videos. So I just thought, they've already played it in the videos. So yeah, I'll just mention that we have had third-party arrangements with some government ministries because we know that we collect this data to inform government policy decision-making. So if at all they come to us with a number of questions, we are glad to plug those into our panel and ask the citizens what they think about it. So we've partnered in the past with Ministry of Water and Environment, Ministry of Health, Ministry of ICT, and also the Food Rights Alliance. So how has this helped? Aiden has already mentioned about the one with the Ministry of Water and Environment. And that happened at a time when we were invited to make a presentation at the Joint Sector Review. This usually has the development partners and also the government actors and a few civil society organizations. So we shared our data and it was showing information on access to clean and safe water, which if I told you to measure very closely to the indicator, I think it's the target is 6.1, you will be looking at access to piped water because the other sources will be far from getting water in time. So at the end of that session, when the lead development partner was making his submission, he mentioned to the ministry that your reports are showing that you do not have available data on the proportion of households that are able to get clean, access to clean and safe water, that is the piped water, at the time when they want it. So, and he mentioned to them, look at the non-state generated data, say from Twaweza, their report had a clear indication on what proportion of the households are actually accessing piped water. So at that point, we thought, okay, this is a good mention from a lead development actor in the water sector. But what we got to know a year later is that within the ministry itself, they had now changed the way they report on access to clean and safe water. They were now looking at what proportion of households are able to access piped water. In the past, they were only looking at their coverage area. Like you start out saying that I'll cover those 2 tables. Then at the end of the year, you report what proportion of those 2 tables you have covered. But now they are looking at the entire population in Uganda. So we believe that we made a good contribution in that matter. On the Ministry of Health, those that were there to watch the video that was played, I won't get much into that. Then for the Ministry of ICT, we have done 2 pieces of work with them. There was one to understand the citizens' views on the local government structure, because we have a number of offices at the district level, but do we, the Wananchi, know which office to go to in case you want to start a business, in case you want to get support on the agricultural production within your community? Well, the findings we got from that data did show that a number of citizens, about 7 out of 10, are not aware which office they will go to in case they are in need of certain pieces of information. Most citizens believe that they will go to the LC1. Now that LC1 is within the village. And the question that we posed to them was, does the LC1 have sufficient information to actually give out to the people? And maybe it could be that the reason we have Emyoga money being utilized as some kind of reward for voting for some people, it could be that the people do not know why that money has been given to them. because maybe the communication officers within the different districts are not pushing out that communication. So based on that, we, Twaweza, together with the Africa Freedom Information Center, we pushed out data and also a guide to access to information, and we have trained a number of people, a number of Ugandans, both at the government level and also at the citizen level, to understand what their rights are, how they can seek information. But now, to arrive at that, we had to first start with the journey of knowing what do citizens know. If the ministry didn't know that citizens don't know that information, they would probably not work with us. Then we also did some work with the Communications and Public Affairs Unit at the Parliament of Uganda. This, we collected data on the role of the MP, because most times Ugandans were, the data was showing us that Ugandans think that the MP is supposed to construct roads and kind of deliver services to them. But in reality, that is not what the MP should do. His roles are way different from that. There are things to do with oversight and so on. So when that data was shared with that unit at the Parliament, they used it to formulate how to plan reach out projects in different communities, but also to understand how do they now do the inductions with the new members of Parliament, so that they know that this is what you promise the citizens, this is what they expect, but this is your actual duty. Then lastly, I'll just mention that there's work that we did together with the Food Rights Alliance. This work we did at the start of the first lockdown in Uganda, and we highlighted a lot of the challenges that Ugandans were experiencing, the issues of food security, the issues of the disruption of the economy at that point in time. And from the feedback we got from the Food Rights Alliance, that the Ministry of Agriculture was now very responsive. And this also prompted other actors like the UN to also do another research on the same, because it really did highlight that the COVID situation was affecting our livelihoods. So that is some of the work that we have done so far. There are a number of other examples, which I can't recall right now, but I hope it gives a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think as Violet comes in, I'll also ask her to make her concluding remarks and also to see us off, the people that have been in the room. So you'll truly be making both your remarks about this and the concluding remarks about the event.
Okay, thank you so much, Raymond. Of course, in terms of, Maria has really given the examples of how the value this data adds to the process. And for me, my general comment is that it remains work in progress. And two reasons. One is that initially when we first started, we did not have inroads into the Parliament. And now we have built those relationships. So our expectation is that going forward, we'll be having some of this data getting directly to some of the legislators. But also to acknowledge that, of course, when you think about the development challenges, they are really broad. And so some sectors are able to use the data, some are not able to, but we continue to find those avenues, how we get in there. But also in some cases, we have to work through partnerships with others to access certain decision-making spaces so that this data feeds in that process. And that is our commitment to continue doing. That said, I personally believe that this citizen-generated data remains very important, and I honestly believe that we should continue to process it, share it, and use all the possible avenues to reach out to the different stakeholders. And of course, that said, we are also exploring how we work more with the academia to make sure the data that we are sharing is in accessible formats so that different people can use it and they can it can guide the many decisions that are being made, but also the programs that are being designed. But also, like one of the things we mentioned, like having this data in time, so that before certain projects are running, before certain things are happening, they are being informed. That being said, I would like us to bring this conversation to a close. But the commitment you get from Twaweza is that we'll continue to raise the data, we'll continue to reach out to those spaces within the civil sector, within the public sector, within the academia, within the government, to make sure it reaches those spaces. And I would like to thank each one of us that has been here today, that has stayed up to this time. Thank you for coming. And I would like to wish us all a safe journey back to our workspaces. And maybe, I think, so there's an empty with a comment? Oh, please do make your comment. It wouldn't be fair if we can close the room without you making your comment.
So I need to apologize, and I slightly came late. I was supposed to be the first person here because Timo gave me this information before. But some engagements really held me up. So I need to apologize. My name is Henry Morris Chibalia. I represent the people of Gabula South constituency. That constituency is in Kamuli, in Busoga region, where I know Twaweza will be doing a program sometime soon. My comment is not far from what my colleagues have said. One, we appreciate the role of the civil societies and NGOs. You are doing a lot to really see that the lives of our people are okay. My request is one to civil societies. We have one duty to do, to put pressure on government. We can collect this data, but I believe equally government has data. But somehow we seem to be indifferent and not bothered. We need to collectively put pressure. I belong to government. But there is a way we should put pressure on government to be focused. Some of these things, these cries of our people down there, the efforts you put in, if government is supplemented and realized that you are playing a part that they are supposed to play, you are covering a gap that they are supposed to play, instead of putting pressure on you saying, when I entered, somebody was saying, when they say this one is doing this, they will begin finding out this one is playing under, on whose behalf is he doing this? Instead of government perceiving you and receiving you or seeing you from the other side that maybe you are against government programs. Government should come in, because sincerely government is taking another trend as the civil societies are taking another trend. You look at some things and you just wonder whether government is interested in seeing the lives of these Ugandans better, or government is interested in something different. Or some people in government are interested in living another life. We have data. Today, yesterday, some days ago, you had that Uganda, when the World Bank allows Uganda is going to be in middle income, they have requested the World Bank to recognize Uganda as a country that is on progress and is entering middle income. But middle income, visit my place, go to my constituency, go to my place, and you will wonder whether the person making that comment is a Ugandan, or you get it. So we have leaders that are behaving as if they are living on another planet, and they are only thinking for others. When they see people in Kampala here driving, they imagine people from Bugabula are the same. So this data is very good, it's very important, but we need collectively to use whatever avenue to put pressure on government, put pressure on these leaders. If the Minister of Finance comes somewhere, you just go out of your normal and put pressure, so that maybe with the time they will realize they are there to serve Ugandans, not to serve their own interests, so that we can see this country better. Otherwise, we are very grateful. We are there to help. We are part of this. And I want to make one. These days, we have forums in Parliament. If you have an NGO that is interested in championing something, and somehow the voice is not reaching well. We could come up with a forum, parliamentary forum on something. We use that voice to add on something and we exert pressure. We must exert pressure day, night, so that these people one day wake up and realize Ugandans deserve better. Thank you.
I think the Honorable has actually wrapped us up. He has called us to collaborate, to come together and push forward so that we can collectively get government to act on some of the concerns of the citizens. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
As a discipline in risk communication or health promotion per se, we work on evidence. So issues of getting to know what is happening in the communities, because when you look at, when you see Sauti za Wananchi, citizens' voices, that was very important. I know, if I may recall, they conducted a number of knowledge, attitude and practices studies in the different communities to get to know their voices. What are they saying on COVID? Why it was a new disease and it was killing people? What is it happening? In fact, one of the useful studies they did was on willingness to get vaccinated. You see, when the issues of COVID-19 vaccination came on board and it was vaccinating the adults 18 and above, this was a group which was not used to getting vaccinated. So it was very important to get to know what are they thinking. Remember, there has been a lot of rumors coming up here and there, what would come as infodemics, and which led to hesitancy. Some people were hesitant to take the vaccine because these were new vaccines tackling a new disease. So it was important to get to know what are the people saying. So in one of those studies, I think we used it to inform our intervention design and message development. What are they saying? What is the problem? So that whatever messages we are coming up with, because I was heading also a subcommittee for message development. So my subcommittee had to look at the different evidence generated, social data generated, so that we are able to design interventions that address the real issues. As you know, with the qualitative data, you sample out in a few places, but then you pick out some of those salient issues which you can generalize, others you can't, and then you tap into other studies that are done, similar studies that are done. So then you sensitize all the different information coming up from the different social listening groups, especially the call centers, and then we are able to come up with interventions that address the issues of the Wananchi. We use data to inform our intervention design and message development. It's very critical. So we look at data locally, generated locally, because we are serving the people in Uganda, not only the people of Uganda, but people in Uganda at the time. So we need to use that data which speaks to their issues. Then we are able to design intervention. If at all it requires to go down and meet them one-on-one, then we know that the intervention we need to use is a one-on-one. If it's just general information, lack of information, maybe we need just to do radio messaging, going on TV and radio. We use that. But remember, during the COVID era, when we were in lockdowns, we could not, with the observance of SOPs, that is keeping distances, social distancing, then we could not go into community engagement. So we would rely very much on social media and all these other traditional media to pass on the information.
We have had a very productive relationship with the Twaweza. A country office in Uganda and had been engaged in several projects. And the most important of this has been our partnership with the Twaweza to do critical agenda setting reporting by using their function of data collection, especially through the Sauti za Wananchi project. One of the key aims of the Editors Guild is to do agenda setting in terms of content interventions across all the media. The Editors Guild is a guild of members of all editors in all the media platforms, be it legacy platforms, be it radio, be it broadcast. Well, we have found that the Twaweza, the feedback from both the audiences, both the users of our media products and the journalists themselves, is that the Twaweza research, especially the one that we do through the Sauti za Wananchi, is very, very helpful in terms of, one, the relevance of the information, number two, and getting the critical voices in the stories. You see, the trend of the media is that normally the media tends to pick the official lines, but the Sauti za Wananchi research gives especially our journalists a chance to look at the other voices, the important citizen voices. So in terms of empowering the citizen to be very well informed, I think that has been very, very helpful and very impactful. I can point out 3 or 4 ways. One is citizen voices. The data is very, very important because the data is picked from the perspective of what the citizen thinks or knows. That gives the journalists a chance to understand that importance of what the citizen is thinking. Number 2 is the relevance of the data. Most of the projects that we have involved have been data that comes up. For example, when we did the project around the Access to Information Act, it was around the anniversary of the 10 years of the Access to Information Act. And it was absolutely relevant to look at, first of all, the stakeholders. How have they been able to use the act? So relevance is very important. And number 3, it is very, very timely in terms of the agenda setting function of the media. Yes. Our partnership with Twaweza and then using the Sauti comes at a very interesting time when the media is faced with issues of changing business models, and then because of the digital disruption across the world, so the media needs to pay more attention to content generation and how content generation can be a revenue stream. So research is a very important component of doing that kind of revenue migration. So I think journalists, editors, and practitioners have been able to use this chance of working with the Twaweza and Sauti za Wananchi to understand and or to see how important research is, especially when media has to migrate and to bring new business models, especially those business models that are helped by content generation.
Information through my phone. I think through social media, different platforms and social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, yes, and also I think through phone calls, because sometimes you want to know what is happening in a place you're not in, and all you have to do is to call someone, maybe send someone a text and they answer you, and then in a way you access information.
Basically, it depends on the kind of information that you want, because you cannot just access information from nowhere. So if it's about education, it means you can use the internet to access academic information, or you can use the library books. There are different sources that can give you information on education. If it's journalism, of course, you have to look for journalists and also media houses that can help you get such information. They also have websites. I visit the different websites. If it's health, I visit the Ministry of Health website to get more information and then use my data appropriately according to the type of information that I need. So basically, it will depend on what kind of information you want for yourself. Then you can be able to access the different sources and the different people responsible in that particular field.
Amawulire ntera okugajja emikutu egy'enjawulo egiri ku mutimbagano, emikutu nga Facebook, emikutu nga Twitter, ntera okuba nga nkebeerakebeerako mpola. Oluusi bwe mba mpulidde amawulire nga sigamanyiiko bulungi nga gyamanya ki ekifaayo, ntera okukebera ku Google nenkebera ku sites ez'enjawulo okuba nga nfuna amawulire gano. Ensimu yange nkikozesa mu ngeri ez'enjawulo okufuna ebiba bigenda mu maaso. Oluusi ntera okuresearchinga ku sites ez'enjawulo nendaba ki ekiba kigenda mu maaso. Oluusi nkuba ku masimu ne mbuuza abakwano bange baba balina okufuna okumanya ku bintu eby'enjawulo. Ntera okukwata essimu ne nkuba ne mbuuza ku mikwano gyange ne mmanya ki ekiba kigenda mu maaso.
Me personally, I access information, I think, in 4 different forms. One, I am a researcher. I like researching. Through research, I access information. Another platform where I get the information is through the websites. Different organizations put out the websites, and those websites really give us the information. And maybe the last other way is books, people's books. People write books, and also they are source of information. That's why whenever someone is speaking, he quotes Professor so and so, he quotes someone, so meaning he received or she received the information from a particular book that someone wrote. So me as a person, those are the 3 ways I access the information.
Kati bwe nneesanga nga waliwo kye nneetaaga kyonna kyonna ntera okugenda ku mutimbagano gwa intaneti nneesanga nga mbinoonyerezaako. Kati tugambe nti waliwo ekintu ekyaguddewo, nneesanga nti nga nnina okugenda ku mitimbagano egy'enjawulo oba Facebook oba WhatsApp oba Twitter ne nnoonya ne nneesanga nga eyo gye mbijja. Wenveeyo ntera okukola n'ogendako nga ku Google.
Well, Sauti za Wananchi as a conceptual approach by Twaweza East Africa has really helped us as journalists, myself as an example, in the agenda setting in a number of ways. As a journalist, I hinge my work on the cores of society as a basis for my executions. So when I look into the healthcare, education, access to information, name it, I'm interested in what helps the public or society for the better. So Sauti za Wananchi as a concept from the Twaweza East Africa came with that unique approach of helping the people know what they are entitled, what they ought to know, what their involvement into the social the improvement of social services and the social well-being, their social well-being. In that way, it helped acquaint the public with knowledge on these aspects of life. That way, when I go to report about news from societies and communities across the board, it's easier for me to bring the narrative of the lay person in the agenda as the agenda for discourse. And that way, people under the Sauti za Wananchi concept blend in my news item to give a product or news that reflects society, but the agenda set from the citizen perspective, as Sauti za Wananchi states. Sauti za Wananchi has complemented the way I do my stories in a way that it's hard for me now to run a story without attaching the human impact and their perspective in the key stories. Their key stories. They could be political, they could be on the access to health, access to information, the social aspects of life, and the society impact of the government programs, and name them. I found it very interesting that beyond asking people what they heard from the budget, the budget presentation, I went as far as asking how impactful they felt this budget was to their lives. And the submissions therein were a very unique story of its own. And across our media platforms, we could see the reactions. We could see, because we called on their participation into the budget thing, but not as a mere commentary, not from a mere commentary aspect, to the impact aspect, which is a key aspect of the Sauti za Wananchi concept. And I feel like it has really worked so well, in my view, as a practitioner and a person who has been parted to it in covering stories across the country. Yes, the Sauti za Wananchi has impressed, of course, me in writing stories from the citizen perspective, but it has the different or unique touch it brought into this field. What is that? We used to write, we used to anchor the citizen's perspective of news as a reaction. Now we have that option. We can start a story from the citizen perspective. If someone says, there's something called the proactive participatory action research that Twaweza pursues, you find that now people can ask a question about the quality of a service. People can question whether a deliverable of a budget aspect was fulfilled. Take, for instance, if a borehole had to be constructed somewhere and it wasn't, a citizen now comes out and asks, why aren't we having this borehole for 5 years, yet it was part of the budget allocation for a certain year? Now, as a journalist, I can start my story from that very aspect. Citizens question the allocation of a given sum of money to a given cause. It has changed the narrative that you had to bring in citizens to react after maybe a politician or a stakeholder or a powers that be had to talk about that very aspect. Now you can begin a story from the citizen perspective. It's unique, and we need to appreciate that. It's a proactive approach, but a more accountability and an accountability aspect. And I think it's the best thing that I've harnessed from it. Citizens can now take the lead of any cause.